Days after an explosive report claims some MPs and senators have worked with foreign governments, opposition parties are hunting for names. The Conservatives sent a letter to the government wanting this report sent to the public inquiry into foreign interference to review and confirm its findings. Now, the NDP have also written a letter saying the inquiry shouldn't stop there. Jagmeet Singh wants an investigation into past Conservative leadership races where India and China are said to have played a role. And the Bloc Québécois introduced a motion to expand the mandate of the public inquiry to investigate those suspected parliamentarians. The Liberals say that may be the best way forward.
We agree with members of this House that the appropriate forum to look at these matters is the Commission already set up.
They won't release the names of the MPs in this House doing dirty work for foreign hostile regimes.
He's known for 11 months and done nothing.
I asked the Deputy Commissioner of the RCMP, Mark Flynn, this morning, what would happen if I stood up and announced a list of names like my colleagues are asking me to do? And he said I would be subject to criminal prosecution. So guess what, Mr. Speaker? I'm not going to do that.
For more on this developing story, I'm joined here in the studio by Mark Gerritsen, the Liberal Deputy Government House Leader. Christina Michaud is the Public Safety Spokesperson for the Bloc Québécois, and Heather McPherson, the NDP Foreign Affairs Critic. Now, we did extend the invitation for a Conservative MP to join the panel, but no one was made available. Ms. Michaud, I'd like to start with you because of the motion that was tabled by your leader in the House. It seems as if this will pass, and this will go to Justice Hogue. But I don't see how Justice Hogue can name names any more than anyone else can because of the secrecy laws. What is your expectation on that?
Well, I think she'll know the best way to proceed, but I think, like Minister LeBlanc was saying, it is the most reasonable way to proceed. We introduced that motion hoping the House of Commons would speak with only one voice, that we would be unanimous, all parties together, wanting to know the truth or wanting to go further on this issue. That is really important, and we have to give the possibility to people to regain confidence in our democracy and in institutions.
Can they do that without the names, though? You know what I mean? Because the allegations in the report are it's senators, MPs, political staff. Can they have confidence without knowing who did what?
I'm not sure. I don't know, to be honest. But I think Justice Hogue will know the best way to proceed, and we have full confidence in her. The mandate at first was decided with all four parties together. So I think the idea to expand the scope of it, it's possible to do it this way, and I think Justice Hogue will agree with that, and she'll want to proceed in the way that seems the most responsible for her.
So Mark Gerritsen, on that point, I mean, we heard the clip there from Dominic LeBlanc saying, I was told by the RCMP, if I stand up and name names, I'm going to go to jail. Now, I don't know if that applies inside the House of Commons, where privilege enforces, but certainly outside. What is your expectation in terms of being able to identify people that intelligence agencies and NSI cops say are potentially bad actors here?
Let's not forget, it's not just Minister LeBlanc that knows the names. It's also NSI Cop. And yes. NSI Cop is set up by members from each political party that sit in the House of Commons too. So just like the minister, they're restricted in anything that they could offer as well. And whether or not parliamentary privilege, to your point, is at play here, we have to remember that there's special legislation set up for this committee, and the members are expected to follow the rules of that committee, whether it be inside Parliament or outside Parliament, for the obvious reasons.
But Dominic LeBlanc wouldn't be a member of this committee, so that legislation wouldn't apply to him any more than if Jagmeet Singh gets read in, or Elizabeth May, or the Prime Minister.
I think Mr. LeBlanc will take the advice that he received this morning with regard to that. But at the end of the day, and you know what has been said is absolutely correct. The Hogue Commission was set up by all members of Parliament. Andrew Scheer, the Conservative House Leader, who isn't here today and really should be, you know, he made a point of saying in a letter to Minister LeBlanc over the weekend that the Hogue Commission is the best place for this to occur. So not only was the Hogue Commission set up unanimously by all parliamentarians, but now the idea that this that the Hogue Commission should be charged with looking into this matter further is also you know, something that appears to have unanimous support.
Heather McPherson, I don't know where you are on naming names, but I watched your leader today, Jagmeet Singh, and he said he's going to try to get read in. If there's a new Democrat on that list, they're out of caucus, no questions asked. But you also want the committee to investigate the past Conservative leadership races where China and India are said in this report to have played a role. What's your goal there?
Honestly, I mean, we need to do everything we can to give Canadians' faith that their democracy is not still being attacked by foreign influence. We have people in the House of Commons right now who are traitors to this country. I mean, this is extraordinarily serious, and I think there has to be a way, whether it is through the Bloc motion, which we will be supporting on having the Hogue Commission be part of that solution. There has to be some way to do that, but it's not just the sitting MPs that I'm concerned about. I'm very concerned that we have leadership races in this country. You know, the Conservative leadership race was named as being influenced by the government of India and by the PRC. This is serious. This is our democracy, and Canadians need to know that all parliamentarians from all parties are taking this extremely seriously, and our democracy doesn't just happen with the MPs. It is the processes by which we get elected to even run for our parties that we have to also consider.
So, as you say, there are allegedly traitors in the House of Commons right now, which is an extraordinary thing to have to say based on the intelligence. But as we've heard, intelligence is not evidence, right? Throughout this whole thing. So say your leader gets read in. Say there is a New Democrat on this particular list, but it's based on intelligence. We don't know the weight of it. We don't know the severity of it, and we don't know the integrity of it. How does he then act credibly without potentially punishing someone based on one fragment of intelligence or something that isn't absolute proof?
So this is why I think we need to have a system in place that brings in a third party or whatever that looks like to make sure that all MPs would be treated equally, and that we would be able to recognize which MPs have, because remember in the report it is witting and unwitting. Those are very different things. Somebody who doesn't necessarily know that they've taken money from the wrong person or whatever, that's a problem, and we need to fix that, and we need to tighten up the supports so that doesn't happen. But wittingly working with the foreign government in our House of Commons, that's a very different situation. Members of the NDP have been victims of foreign interference. The leader of our party, Jagmeet Singh, has been a victim of foreign interference.
Jenny Kwan as well?
Jenny Kwan has been a victim. I would be very concerned about members from, they said two parties. I think we can all agree that it is most likely to be the Liberal and the Conservative parties of Canada.
Well, I mean, those are the parties that have competed for government, and have been the front-runner parties politically. So if you were trying to influence them, that seems like the best targets, right? So, Christina Michaud, on this, Mr. Blanchet has not yet decided if he will read the unredacted report, which comes with conditions that he can't say certain things. What do you expect your leader might do there? And how does this, sending it to Justice Hogue, how do you see that as a remedy to the lack of confidence people have right now? What do you hope it leads to?
Well, I cannot speak for Mr. Blanchet, but I know he is considering having that security clearance to look at those documents and having more information on the matter. He cannot obviously say what he's reading, but he can take action to make sure that people in our caucus are all clear, if I can say it this way. I would be very surprised if members of the Bloc were involved in this, but it could happen, and we need to take serious actions if that were the case. But I think, just like Heather said, we need to, as parliamentarians, as political parties, do whatever it takes to make sure people have confidence in democracy and in the government as well. So
Mr. Garretson, on that, right? I mean, Ms. McPherson, the logical deduction is that it would probably be the Liberals and the Conservatives who are the most likely targeted. Would you agree with that assumption that you're probably the most vulnerable parties?
I would say that probably because we're government in opposition, we would be amongst, and people, I think, naturally assume that one of us will be in government. But I think what's really important here is that, it doesn't matter what political party you belong to. I don't care, if this comes down to Liberals or Conservatives or NDP or Bloc. Proper actions need to be taken, and I think that everybody agrees on that. I think, David, where the struggle is right now is in the manner in which it's dealt with, and I actually think that what the Bloc is proposing in their opposition day motion today is very reasonable and actually, sets up a process for helping to deal with that information. I think it's also critically important for every leader to have this information. The fact that they can't repeat it should not be a reason to not get the information.
So you're talking about Pierre Poilievre here, because he won't read the report.
And Mr. Blanchet, to a little degree, although
Mr. Blanchet does not aspire to be Prime Minister. Mr. Poilievre could be Prime Minister.
But he could still benefit from the information. But I'm certainly referring to Mr. Poilievre, who, unlike Mr. Blanchet, is considering it, has full out said, I'm not doing it. And as a matter of fact, he's been the leader for over a year now, and he still hasn't got that clearance that he could have got. It's very easy to get the clearance. If he had that clearance, he could sit down and the Prime Minister and him could have conversations about exactly what's going on. But the reality is Mr. Poilievre has no interest in having those conversations. He has no interest in knowing this information. What his end goal here is to not be informed so that he can continue to, entice rage and throw out, throw darts at absolutely everything he possibly can, because he doesn't have to be accountable for having knowledge.
Okay, I want to get your reaction to that, but first, you said we had to do the right thing, or words to that effect.
Yeah.
The Conservative leadership races have been mentioned in this report. So have Liberal nominations.
Yep.
These are things completely controlled by the party outside of election Canada scope, and they are a problem, according to the intelligence service. Does your party need to clean up the way it does nominations?
I think that we all need to look at this, take recommendations that come back from Hogue after after they look into this, and then make a decision on what to do. I think it's really important, David, to remember that. And you've said this on your program many times, and I think you even said it earlier today, is that intelligence is not evidence. It can be everything from a rumor to substantiated claims.
But the vulnerabilities in the processes are independent of what the facts are.
Right.
The processes have weaknesses.
Right. So I think that what we need to do is let a third party, the Hogue Commission in this case, give recommendations as to what we can do better to strengthen those, so that we don't even have the perception that you can be influenced, because even the perception alone is damaging to our democracy. And I really hope and I really believe that it's something that all political parties can unite around without partisanship attached to it. And I genuinely believe that the NDP and the Bloc and Liberals come from that perspective. Unfortunately, the one party that's not sitting at this table seems to be really politicizing this for political opportunity.
Well, the Conservatives were invited. They declined. But Ms. McPherson, just on that point, that Mr. Poilievre, who has also been invited to read the NSI COP report and up until now has declined, why do you think that is? There have been arguments from Conservatives that they've adopted the Reform Act, so he can't throw people out of caucus without support of caucus. He can't share information that he's bound not to reveal due to secrecy. You can do things with nominations. You can tell them you will not be the candidate for this party, even though you can run. But why do you think the Conservative leader is refusing to read in on this?
I have no idea. Honestly, Jagmeet wanted to get that information because the more information you have, the better. But I'll say one thing. The fact that the leader of the Conservative Party refuses to get this information when his own party is named as having challenges with the leadership race that he was in is a problem. But also, let's not forget, I don't want to let the Liberals off the hook. They've had this information for 11 weeks. They've had this information for a very long time and have done nothing. And
well, how do we know that? There's been no public action, but we don't know what's happened behind the scenes, right?
Well, there certainly hasn't been anything done publicly. But also, I think importantly to keep in mind, too, is that, what we need to be doing is making sure that people feel that they can trust in their democracy. 11 weeks with not a peep from the government is also not something that makes me feel particularly confident as a Canadian that my democracy is being protected.
So Christina Michaud, going to give the last word to you. Your thoughts on whether you think the government has acted since receiving this information, because I know the report needed to be released publicly, and why you think Mr. Poilievre is not getting read in.
Well, it is quite ironic that it's the Bloc that is introducing this motion today. I mean, the government has obviously had more information than us over the last couple of weeks or months and hasn't done anything or spoke to the other parties to say, hey, let's talk to Justice Hogue and try to expand the scope of the inquiry. But it is coming from the Bloc. But as we said, we hope it is a non-partisanship thing to do, which seems okay with my colleagues here.
There you go.
Yes, but I think it is really important. We're doing politics in Canada. yes, but in Quebec as well, and we need people to trust us. And yes, Mr. Poilievre should, well, there should be a Conservative member here talking about this with us, and the Conservatives should be more proactive on that issue as well.
Okay, we're out of time. We'd love to have you back if there's further developments on this. Mark Garretson, Christina Michaud, and Heather McPherson, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you.
For more on all of this, Philippe Lagacé is an associate professor at Carleton School of International Affairs. He's here in the studio. Professor Lagacé, it's good to see you. Thanks for coming. You too, David. Thanks. Let's start with the question that's out there. People want names named. Setting aside whether this should happen, if the government or member of parliament or a cabinet minister wanted to name a name, how would they go about doing it?
Well, it would be difficult for them. Number one, they would be warned by the intelligence community, by those that know how sensitive this information is and what implications it might have for the collection of sources, for our allies that have shared it with us. They would be told in very stark terms that they shouldn't share this information unless they have some confidence that the sources and the information could be protected. Mm-hmm. As importantly, they are all privy councillors in cabinet. They've sworn an oath to secrecy around this as well. So they even if they have the ability to, in the proceedings of Parliament, which they do, they would have a number of reasons why they would not want to disclose this information.
Okay, so just talk about that, the ability to do so in the proceedings of Parliament. This is where parliamentary privilege comes into it. Now, all the members on NSICOP, the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, they have signed on through legislation to something that forbids them from using parliamentary privilege if they do this. But if the Prime Minister wanted to, I'm not saying he should, but if he wanted to, he could stand in Parliament and name the names, right? And be protected from prosecution. Is it that simple?
It is that simple. As a parliamentarian, let's leave aside his role within the executive. Let's leave aside the fact that he's a privy councillor and all the...
So Jagmeet Singh, if he was writing, could do
this,
for example.
all the considerations. But parliamentary privilege exists in our system precisely to ensure that the legislature can hold the government to account and, in some cases, provide information that's in the public interest for our democratic institutions to function properly. And so this might be a case where you could argue that a parliamentarian that was privy to this information could disclose it, being shielded from the legal consequences of doing so.
Okay, so there is a way to do it without legal consequences, but as you spelled out, there are a lot of knock-on consequences. If someone is under investigation, that would be declared to the world, and that could compromise the police. It could jeopardize intelligence sources. I mean, how do you weigh those risks versus what we heard from people like Heather McPherson saying there are traitors in the Canadian Parliament right now?
Well, there's many different ways that you could do it. Above all, you try and get all party leaders to agree to be briefed on the information. They can learn the scope and extent of what's alleged, who it applies to. As the NSICOP report implies, some of this is unwitting. Some of this may not be something that somebody was fully aware of what was happening. In other cases, you might have a very clear case of somebody who probably shouldn't be in a party caucus, may be excluded from that. And we've had many cases where people are excluded from party caucuses because there's allegations of fraud, sexual misconduct, whatever it is. You're not owed a seat in caucus. And if your party leader, having been briefed on this information, believes that you probably should not be sitting in that caucus, even if it doesn't rise to the level of a criminal charge, then that may be a possibility.
So we know the Prime Minister has read it and is briefed in, obviously. Jagmeet Singh says he's working with the security officials to get read in this week. Mr. Blanchet is considering it. Elizabeth May, as I understand it, is being read in today. But Pierre Poilievre is refusing to do it. What do you make of that move? That right now, if you believe the polls, he'll be Prime Minister after the next election, and he's not getting read in on this.
I think from a purely political point of view, he doesn't have an incentive to. Mm-hmm. It makes a lot more sense from, again, a purely partisan point of view to be able to critique and lob accusations at the government and demand answers, as opposed to have to say, I've learned this and I can't say anything. However, let's set aside the partisan aspect of it, and to your point, I think we need in this country to achieve a different nature of national security maturity, and that would involve having all parties understand that matters of national security are something that all party leaders need to be briefed about when they rise to this level, particularly when it affects them, their parties, and the legislature. And so I'm hoping that even though the Conservatives have a partisan interest not to be read in so that they can continue to critique more openly, I hope that they understand and appreciate that political maturity and national security in this country requires that they do.
Does not having the opposition leader write in any way affect Parliament's ability to respond to this? I mean, how do you can see a scenario where the leaders would get together and come up with a joint path forward, and you can't really do that when the second most important leader in the House isn't part of that.
Well, as we've seen today in transferring this over to the Hogue inquiry, we already have something of an all-party consensus on some ways of dealing with this. What if the Hogue inquiry comes back and says, yes, what NSICOP found is correct as far as we can tell based on the intelligence. However, we also, as the inquiry, we can't name the names. What's the next step? The next step still, again, falls on the party leaders, all the party leaders, to come up with some mechanism by which they can all agree on how to proceed. They can look at the evidence and come up with some set of criteria that they will apply to their own parties so that Canadians can have confidence in how the House of Commons is managing this.
This is the key thing, because they can send it to Justice Hogue, but it kind of boomerangs back to them, ultimately, for responsibility, because she's even more bound by the national security laws than a member of Parliament would be, because she has no privilege. She's a judge. She can't rise and break the law. So what is the value of this process, in your view?
I understand that perhaps it adds a bit of a pause here, it cools things down, and it allows the inquiry to have a second set of eyes on the work of NSICOP. That being said, I do find it a bit strange that we do have a committee of parliamentarians who has looked at this, who has reported on it as an all-party committee, and who has laid down these findings. And then we have their peers in Parliament saying, okay, well, that's all well and good, but we want another inquiry to have a second look at it to check your work. Okay, fair enough. But what happens when the inquiry then says, yes, some of these allegations are correct? What is the next step? Now, I hope that in the interim period between now and October, which is when they would like the inquiry to report back, that they develop some idea of what they're going to do with this information if Justice Hogue chooses or is unable to air the names.
What are you, just as a final point, what are your thoughts on whether we should know the names? Because it's intelligence, it's not evidence. These are assumptions or bits of information, not a verdict, not a conclusion. What are your thoughts on how much Canadians should know at this point?
I think it comes down to a matter of political judgment that has to be exercised by political leaders after they've been briefed on this. There may be several different cases. There may be several different gradations of what's been done. In some cases, the NSICOP has already told us that some of this is unwitting, some is semi-witting, and some of it's witting. So it has to be done on a case-by-case basis, exercising political judgment, which is what we should expect from political leaders in this country when it comes to national security.
Philippe Lagacé with Carleton University. I want to thank you for your time today. Appreciate it very much.
Appreciate it.